Hello and welcome to another edition of Know Your Schools on WISD TV. My name is Dale Caffey. My very special guest today is Rick Hartley. He is the Executive Director of Student Services at Waco ISD. And Rick, thank you so much for joining us today. Executive Director of Student Services, and you have your hand in a lot of things at Waco ISD. First of all, let's talk about what all your job entails, if you can remember it all in one sentence.
I'll give that a shot. All right, let's start with homeless students, foster students. We have PEEMS, transportation, counseling, all custodial, all maintenance, nursing. No, I can't get it all.
I didn't think so.
That's the beginning.
Because you have a lot to do, and we're going to go over some of those things throughout the course of this interview. But first of all, let's one of the reasons that we do know your schools, so people get to know the people behind the scenes that do a lot of work. You've not always been behind the scenes, though. You were recently a principal not too long ago. Talk about your career at Waco ISD.
Well, I came out here in '99, started in the fall, and I was a beginning and math teacher at Tennyson Middle School. I did that for about 5 years, became an instructional specialist at Tennyson for 1 year, moved up to assistant principal for 3, and then I became principal at University Middle School, where I did that for 4 years before transitioning to administration down here.
How's that transition gone? Do you miss the campus life?
When you are on a campus, you always enjoy the interactions with the kids. I mean, you always look back, that's the part I really, really enjoyed. But now that I'm here, so busy, you don't really have time to reflect back on things that you might have missed.
But as a campus principal, the job you have now, you realize the importance of the things you do now because you are helping children on all campuses.
That's true. I view everything that I do in all my departments, we are support services. We need to make sure everything we do is done well so the principal and the teachers on the campus can take care of their business, which is educating children. They don't need to think about all the portions that pretty much my department deals with.
Now, you were the campus at University Middle School, the old University Middle School, which is now an HEB. Do you ever look at that piece of land and just realize and say, you know, not too long ago I was working right there, and now you're buying your groceries there?
Actually, just this last weekend, driving by it, I'm envisioning all the different classrooms, all the different hallways I used to walk down. It's a little bit different thing. That's now our fruit section.
The fruit section. Now, one of the things that you've been doing lately, and we now completed our second year at, is online registration. That's something that we've been wanting to do a long time. Talk about how that has gone. You know, we had year 1 was kind of a trial year. We just finished year 2, and we're still trying to perfect that system.
Well, the whole idea of online registration is to make it easier for parents. Majority of the information that we have from year to year does not change. If they've not moved, their phone numbers haven't changed, they still have the same guardians who can also come pick up children. So most of that material is still there. There's really not a reason for parents to have to fill it out over and over. Online registration allows them to go online, look at all the pages. If there's anything that has changed, they can make quick edits. But mostly it allows them to go quickly through the registration process.
And that also allows you and your other department, PEEMS, a chance to have records more quickly because there's less manual entry. Is that right?
Yes. In the old days, just 3 years ago, we would have 15,000 packets of registration forms. Each packet could be 8-10 pages long. Each of those had to be hand-keyed by a staff member. Now, if we have online registration instead, it automatically flows into our eSchool, which is our student information system, and the data is available within 30 minutes.
And of course, registration leads into the PEEMS numbers because PEEMS is all about the number of students we serve and the different ethnicities, can I say that right? But, and you're over PEEMS. And we recently had a long conversation with Lisa Hall, who is over PEEMS and counseling, but you are Lisa's boss.
Yes, she is doing a fantastic job. From when she took over the PEEMS department to where we are right now, it's one of the premier departments in the district. They are just doing fantastic work.
Very good. And of course, once we have the numbers registered, we have to put them on campuses. And that's another thing that you're responsible for is to monitor campus capacities, yes, to make sure that we're not underutilizing some campuses and yet overcrowding others. And you presented a report to the school board recently, and we're on track. I mean, last year we did have some overcrowding issues at Cesar Chavez Middle School, at Bells Hill, but those things have evened out, and in part to the rezoning that we had to do.
Yes, the board this last year did subtle tweaks to what our rezoning efforts had accomplished for the year before, because we still found a couple schools were beyond what we consider capacity. And the capacity is important, because that helps us determine how many students really can fit on a campus. Now, we publicize some general information. Example, Bells Hill may say 92%.
Right.
Well, that just means of every student who could possibly fit on that campus, 92% of the seats are taken. If you have to go actually deeper to find out really if there's room on a campus by grade level. Because TA gives us regulations that we have to have 22 students in a classroom. We cannot exceed 22. Well, not all school zones, students come to us in groups of 22.
Right.
So even though it might say 92%, we might only have 19 kids in this class here, but we'll have a need for 25 kids in this other class because it's a different grade level. So the capacity numbers give us a general idea, but we definitely need to look deeper into individual grade levels, both elementary, middle school, and high school.
Of course, at the school board's request, we wanted to share these numbers with the public that you had in the report, so we'll take a look at the first 5 elementary schools. Alta Vista with 94%, Bells Hill at 90%, Brook Avenue at 88%, Cedar Ridge at 90%, and Crestview at 96%. Those are pretty good numbers and pretty efficient use of a building.
Absolutely, and that's what we really want. We want the most efficient use of that building. We don't want to have a bunch of empty seats in a classroom, because that doesn't accomplish what we're trying to do. With a 22-to-1, those percentages work really well. But even in those cases, we have some grade levels that are really full. And they're full right now. By next semester, it could be a completely different shift. That's one thing about our capacity numbers. They actually change every single day as students come into our district and withdraw.
Right. These numbers are fluctuating daily. Let's take a look at the next 5 campuses. We have Dean Highland at 92. Hillcrest is pushing 100% capacity. Right now they're at 97%. Hines, by design right now, is down at 80% because we want to give that principal a smaller group of kids to work with in his first year. That campus has been struggling, and so we're trying to improve the academics there. Lake Air, Montessori Magnet School at 90% and Kendrick at 88%. Let's first talk about Hillcrest being at 97 right
Actually,
now.
that's an excellent example. Hillcrest is not an attendance zone school. It's a magnet. So they're actually able to identify how many students can they actually enroll per grade level. And we look for groups of 22-to-1, and that's how many they actually allow into the campus. The fact that they're 97% probably means a couple kids have moved over summer. But that's probably our best utilized as far as an efficient plan, because they can actually select groups of 22 at a time, or allow groups of 22 into their campus.
And let's talk about J.H. Hines at 80%. I mentioned that's by design. Trey Hall, first year as principal at that campus. It's been struggling academically, and so he could probably handle more students. But right now he's trying to get that campus en route to being academically acceptable.
And there's also a program going on over there with some boys' classrooms only, single gender classes. And those are not being maintained at a 22-to-1. They're targeting that at a 15-to-1. So when you do a subtle change like that, that also reduces your capacity on the campus, or at least our percentage number.
Let's finish out our look at the elementary campuses with Mountain View at 80%, Parkdale 77%, Provident Heights at 94%, South Waco at 72%, which I believe looks like the lowest utilization on the chart. And then, of course, West Avenue is 82%. First, let's talk about West Avenue, because West Avenue helped Bells Hill out this year.
Yes. Bells Hill last year was one of our campuses that exceeded our capacity. We only really had room for 900, and yet we had more than 900 show up. We don't turn students away. If they live in the attendance zone, we take them in, but that pushed us well beyond our 22-to-1. We had to request waivers from the district, or excuse me, from the state for that. So we had to make some changes. So by bringing their numbers back down to within capacity, some of those students then went to other locations. West Avenue did receive some students that previously had attended on Bells Hill.
Let's talk about Parkdale at 77, and I believe 77 is the lowest number we had on this chart. Parkdale, a very high-performing school, still has some room for some students, despite the closure a few years ago of Viking Hills, which took in some of those students. So talk about Parkdale a little bit. They could handle a few more students?
Yes, they could. And as I said, as we see students come into our district, but also I mentioned the homeless students that I have, we have the ability to place those students at campuses based upon their needs. And that is a campus I keep in mind. But again, I have to look at, do they have room in a particular grade level? So 77 may say for the whole campus, but they still are going to have some grades that are pushing capacity.
Okay, let's take a look at the chart now of our middle school capacities and current enrollment. And you can see that Tennyson Middle School at 75%, Indian Spring at 80%. We have Cesar Chavez at 92%. We'll talk about that in just a moment. And then, of course, G.W. Carver is a bit low in enrollment right now, and we'll talk about that as well. First of all, let's talk about Cesar Chavez at 92%, and that's actually down from what they were last year.
Yeah, we actually have fewer students, and we really needed to adjust our attendance zone. By changing Bells Hill, reducing their enrollments for this year, in long term, that also affects Cesar Chavez and University High School. We have feeder patterns, and you go from one school to the next. Now, both Bells Hill and Cesar Chavez were beyond really where we could comfortably house them on the campus. Cesar Chavez, brand new school. Definitely, I see the desire to want to go there, but there's still limited space. And we even have, in our capacity, larger numbers we use for middle schools. We don't deal with a 22-to-1. We calculate them at 28 students per classroom. Now, it's ideally if every class did have 28 students. Sometimes we actually have larger. That's just the way sometimes it works.
Okay, so there's a look at the utilization of your campuses. And again, I think that Dr. Kane is heading in the right direction. Obviously, the state kind of made us close some schools, but we are operating more efficiently these days.
Oh, I agree with that completely. Our elementary numbers alone show that we're pushing 90% in almost every elementary. So those are definitely better utilized. Two of our middle schools, 75 and 80%, very well utilizing those campuses. So we're going the right direction.
You touched on something a moment ago as we progress now in this interview, and that is you mentioned homeless students.
Yes.
We have quite a number of homeless students. People may not realize that.
By the McKinney-Vento definition, 1 in 10 students in Waco ISD qualify for homeless or homeless services. And in some cases that would actually warrant transportation and determining what campus they go to and for how long. We don't want a lot of disruption in those students' lives. So once we actually put them into campus, despite what happens to them in their home life, we actually entitle them to stay at that campus for as long as they would be at that school. It's not necessarily just this year, it could be for 4 years, 5 years. We want to provide stability for those students.
You also oversee, Rick, the attendance, truancy, and dropout initiative. You have a good man working for you in David Ellis.
Absolutely.
But talk a little bit about what we're trying to do to improve attendance in Waco ISD.
Just they need to get the word out and understand that it is important those students be in the classroom. No, there's all kinds of state requirements for those students, but they can't be successful in their classes, they can't be successful in those tests if they're not in the classrooms to start with. So through cooperations with our PCLs, campus staff, communicating with parents, we just get the word out that it's so important for them to be in those rooms.
That's right, and David Ellis doing an excellent job there, also has some incentive programs going, so hopefully that will continue to improve. After school programs, you're over that too. Like I said, you couldn't name them all in that first sentence that we had because you couldn't remember them all. But after school is important too, and we're not talking about just babysitting after school and letting people play. We're talking about continued learning.
Absolutely. The after school programs, school elementary will end at 3:15, but those students, great numbers of them don't go home. They stay around that campus. YMCA, Kids in Company, CIS. We even have 2 campuses that run their own after-school program. But we have continued education that takes place. There's homework help, there's special tutors come in. There are also enrichment activities that students participate in. It's also a service for the parents because many of them aren't home at 3:15 when students get out of school. This gives them a nice, safe place to go as well.
Very good. You are also over the granting of, or I guess the application and thus eventually the granting of transfers. And you have a system in place. Parents need to know that, again, we looked at those capacity numbers, but they don't always tell the story as to whether you can or can't grant a transfer.
I'm glad you brought that up. We have 2 forms of transfers. Within the district, you can go from school to school, and you can make the request for that. Or we have out-of-district transfers. You may live in a different district, but you really want your students to attend our district. And we have a great number of those as well. Now, our principals have been told they can accept transfers to their campus until their campus capacity reaches 95%. Now, again, we have to look at it more than just the whole campus. We have to look at it by grade. So you may have a second grader that wants to go to, I'll use Bells Hill again, But that principal has to look and say, how much room do I have in my second grade classrooms? So if they don't have room, they can't accept that transfer. But that is in place every year. Now, the important thing for parents to understand is those transfers are good for that year only. Each year they need to reapply. And the deadline for those transfers are June 30th of each year. So if they want their child to attend that school or a different school, they have until June 30th to submit that transfer application.
And I think it's important for our parents at home to know that we have a very mobile student body within the district. We have families that move for whatever reason during the school year, and sometimes you have to accommodate them and sometimes you can't.
Right. It's almost as if 1 in every 4 students will not finish the school year at the school they start with. Some students will move 1 time, some students will move 3 or 4 times in that same school year. Now that's actually difficult for those students. Each time you move, you actually step back a little bit in your learning process. So that's one thing the district has done to make sure we have a very consistent curriculum at each campus to help those children not take those big steps back. But no, that's very important that we are aware of that, and we do accommodate the children. If they move into an attendance zone, we welcome them into that campus.
And we mentioned this earlier, but sort of glossed over it, maintenance. Well, what a huge job that is. You have several people working for you in maintenance, but do you have to keep up with the needs throughout all of our buildings and even have input on future bond referendums too, probably?
Yes, I would have some input in those directions. But maintenance is all the custodians on campus, all the maintenance crews who go out and fix things that come up on each of the campuses. And it's all the grounds crew that go ahead and take care of all of our landscaping across the entire district. I mean, there's a lot of people involved in that. We have Craig Finley, director of our maintenance, but he's got several very capable supervisors that work with him as well, making sure that all of our campuses are well taken care of.
Okay, we mentioned more than a dozen things that you're over. Of all the things that you oversee, which one is the most challenging, number one?
Challenging, I would say each week may present different things. To start a school, it's definitely registration. But at the same time, we talk about transportation, which is also under me.
That's right.
And we have to coordinate what buses we need, which students qualify for transportation, which ones do not. There's regulations we have to follow by the state of Texas. They tell us anybody inside 2 miles, they have to walk to school. It's a tough conversation when you tell that parent your child is 1.9 miles from school. I'm not allowed to offer transportation to you.
Right.
So I'd say week by week it's a different challenge.
Week by week. And I forgot to add transportation to the list. Chalk up another one for Rick Hartley. Okay, let me ask you this then. What is the most gratifying thing about your job? When you go home and you've had some challenges that day and you've tackled whatever the challenge is, what's the most gratification you get?
I just look back and I pretty much think of everything I've done that's taken the load off those principals on those campuses. They need to focus on education, and we need to focus on everything else for them. I've pretty much told the people on the campuses, if you look around, you'll see teachers, and you'll see administrators, and you'll see a secretary. About everybody else somehow falls under student services. So our job is to support the campuses and make sure that they don't have to think about the things we do.
Wonderful. You're doing a great job. Thank you so much, Rick Hartley.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. Once again, this is Rick Hartley, your Executive Director of Student Services at Waco ISD. My name is Dale Caffey. I'll see you next time with another edition of Know Your Schools.